Well, hey everybody, glad you are watching this, and I am here with my friend Boz Poon. Boz and I got to know each other in terms of my role with the district office just about 2 years ago, and uh, Boz is going to tell you his story. But Boz, I discovered shortly after I met you that. There is a lot to your personal story, and it's one of those stories that has got to be true because it is just so incredible. I'm not sure anybody would necessarily make this up. So listen, just by way of introduction, Boz, if you could just sort of tell people who you are and what you're doing, and we're going to get to that in a bit. I forgot to mention, we're going to, just for those of you who are watching, we're going to do this as a two-part interview. So the first half is going to be Boz's personal story, and then the second half is going to be a little bit more about where he serves and what he's doing. But Boz, can you give us just like the snapshot biography, and then we'll get into your story, okay?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Boz. My legal name is Boz Poon. But however, I was a rapper. So, every rapper has a rapper name. So it's BOZ, stands for Born of Zion. I was born and raised in Hong Kong. Came to Canada when I was 12 years old. So when I first landed in Vancouver with my parents, I was pretty young and I didn't know much about the Western culture. I mean, I understand that Hong Kong has been a colony of England. We have to learn English, but we don't have to use it on a daily basis. And the culture is very different, very different. So I got a very big culture shock when I first came to Canada, especially the schooling systems. For instance, in Hong Kong, we have to wear uniform. So 7 days, not 7 days a week, 5 days a week when I go to school, I have to wear a uniform. But Canada is different. You have to pick out your own outfit. It's like everything is different in Canada. So for the first few years, I did get a little bit of feeling isolated and not being able to fit in, so to speak, especially the language barrier back then. I wasn't able to speak English like I am today back then. So I felt extremely lonely when I first came to Vancouver, so to speak. Now, when I went to high school later on, I met up some people that brought me to a new path in life. I met some gangster in school, and they brought me to a new world of things I never tried before, like rave party, house party, and started listening to hip hop music and try to do marijuana and try different drugs and whatnot. So went down that path for a little while, and then a few years down the road, I had an awakening moment where I was in this particular rave party. I was standing in the middle of the dance floor. The DJ was spinning up there, and then everyone around me was just dancing like crazy. And that day, I didn't take any drugs. I was sober that day. And then I did a 360 to look around me, and I saw everyone was just dancing to the DJ like zombies. And I thought to myself, I was like, oh my goodness, have I been like them for the past few years? Like, was I one of them? And do I want to keep doing this? Because it's kind of scared me that day, because everyone just feels like they're kind of like a mindless zombies just dancing to the tunes. So ever since that experience, I did some very deep soul searching and whatnot. I quitted the party scenes, but then I kind of pursue my desires that for a creative outlet, because I'm a very creative person. Like I'm an artist myself, so I just try to find different creative outlets to just express that creativity. And then long story short, I later on became a recording artist, kind of like one of the very, very first Chinese rappers in the Asian market.
I gotta hit pause on there for a second. And here's why. So I mean, I'm born in Canada.
Right.
I'm born not just in Canada, in the prairies. Okay, I'm
Right.
as white as they come. So,
Mm.
um, so
I get it.
Chinese rapper. Those two words had never been
Right.
said in a sentence
Mm.
for me until I had met you. So
I
um,
understand.
I just didn't know it was a thing. So
Mm.
uh, just tell me a little bit about uh, the I guess the expression of your art, of
Right.
your music,
Yeah.
in that context, because I would guess most people who are watching this have have never been exposed to Chinese rap.
I can only imagine. Yeah, so I'm talking about when I was 19 years old, um, 19, 20 years old. I just, because of how I was brought up and starting to listening to hip hop music in the Western
Mm-hmm.
content, I just love those kind of music. And back then, in those times, like what you said, like Chinese rap is not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I self-taught it myself. I listened to a lot of like Western rap, and then learned the structures, learned the rhyme scheme, how they structure the rap, and how and I just turned it into Chinese, in Cantonese, my mother tongue, and then in Mandarin,
Mm-hmm.
the main dialogue that Chinese people will speak nowadays. So that I believe that is one of the reasons why I got picked up by two record labels, because back then it's just not a thing, and they saw that it's a great market
Okay.
to explore in this genre, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. So again, I know a little bit of your story. So you you got picked up by these labels, and you were on track to sign,
Mm-hmm.
and and then there was a whole series of events that happened, and so
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about that.
Yes. So before I flew to Taipei to sign with EMI Music with my hip hop crew that I self-produced with a few good friends, um, but my family moved from Coquitlam to Richmond, which is a lot closer to the airport, because like
Mm-hmm.
the travel distance can be quite a drag for people that has to constant travel.
Right.
Then the house in Coquitlam, my parents' place, was vacant. Is empty. So remember I told you some of back then I had some gangster friends that I never like cut tie with, even though I didn't go to the party scenes no more, just for
Mm-hmm.
respectful reasons. So they asked if they can use the house, and long story short, because we have a time limit today, I let them use the house, and then that whole incident turned out to be a kidnapping incident where some of these people put the victim in the basement of my parents' place, and this whole shenanigan caught me into a long trial of about 2 years and 10 months of going to the Supreme Court to fight for this case.
Yeah.
And at the end, I lost, and I received a 12-year sentence.
Wow.
Mm.
So, if there are parents watching this, your
Right.
kids are probably never going to get in this much trouble.
I
Um,
hope not.
yeah, let's hope not, eh? So, so you were found guilty of what, like
Mm.
accessory to kidnapping or something like that?
Well, I kind of find out in the middle of the whole event,
Yeah.
but I didn't call the police. I let them. Well, I kind of got dragged into protecting the house, and then the whole gang, so to
Yeah.
speak. And of course, at the end of the day, they all got caught. And well, the house was my parents, so the police called my parents, and we went back to the old house. And then I got arrested
Right.
at the front yard of my old place.
So, so you go through the trial, you're
Yeah,
convicted,
yeah.
and you go to prison.
I ended up in prison,
And
and
so again,
mm.
as middle class white kid, got in a bit of trouble, but never
Oh,
been
tell
in
me about it.
prison. Uh,
Understand that.
what is like? Tell me, like,
Mm,
I'm sure you have loads of stories, but like, what was that like?
mm, mm, mm.
I mean, how old? So how old were you at
Yeah.
this point?
I was 24 years old.
Okay.
I entered prison in 2006. I was
Mm-hmm.
24 years old back then. I was still very young, as you know. Going into that world is like, wow, it's another whole different world.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I came from Hong Kong to Canada, it's a whole different world. Now from a free world to a prison world is totally different. I think one of two of them, the most significant things that I noticed right away is the freedom. Like I don't get to call and whoever whenever I want anymore. I cannot order pizza or Starbucks whenever I want anymore. So that freedom when has been taken away from me. I noticed it right away that how ignorant I was, not being able to treasure the complete freedom, well,
Mm-hmm.
the freedom that I had in the outside world. And
Right.
secondly, is the mindset of dignity. My name has been replaced by FPS numbers, which is a prison numbers,
Wow.
and I don't. I wasn't being treated like a normal human being anymore. Like I felt like somehow like a slave or an animal if you want to put it into comparison.
Mm-hmm.
And that really got me thinking a lot of
Mm-hmm.
searching. So what now? Like I had a 12-year sentence. I
Mm-hmm.
lost my music career, and on top of owing owing my parents a tons of lawyers fee and just crazy. I
Mm-hmm.
just crumble. Like the word crumble, I think would be
Mm-hmm.
a good word to describe how I felt when I first entered prison.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, it was obviously a uh, like a catalyzing experience. The loss of freedom, like you said. I mean, your
Mm,
whole world crumbled.
right.
Um, now, but there was good that came out of that, right?
Yes,
And so
yes, of
maybe
course.
you could tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, about 1 year in the prison systems, all of many incidents, I got into a very deep depression, as you can imagine. I
Mm-hmm.
was learning how to survive in prison while I was surrounded by a lot of different kind of people, especially the underworld gang members in the prison world. I struggle a lot how to stay sharp and stay healthy and survive through those through that world. But however, like I cannot lie, I got into very deep depression. I could not see the end of the tunnel,
Mm-hmm.
and so to speak. So in my darkest hours in prison, um, I had a very unique and supernatural, or you can say, experience of Jesus. I saw a white light came down to visit me, enter into my heart, and I heard somebody said, "Do not be afraid. I am your Lord, and I will rescue you." And that experience to me, I know it's really hard to believe, and I even till today, I still hard to grasp the my sentence didn't get reduced one little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but my attitude towards life started to change. I started to learn more about who Jesus was. I learned about different religion through the library in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I later on became a chapel workers working in the prison chapel. Did a few peer counseling courses, and then later on become an inmate peer counselor to help other inmates in prisons. Later on,
Wow.
later on study some Bible college courses, and one thing leads to the other. I became an evangelist in prison for the for the time I was in prison, and the good news was after serving 4 years in prison,
Mm-hmm.
my parole officers saw that hey, my record has been very clean and has been very positive. So they suggested me to apply for an early parole, and by God's grace, I got it, and I got to serve the rest of my sentence, the remaining 8 years of my sentence in the outside world under curfews and supervision from the
Mm-hmm.
parole board and whatnot.
Wow. So
Long
four
story short,
years. Sorry.
yes. Long story short, this is a
Yeah.
very
Oh yeah, yeah.
short
Very, very
narration.
long
Yeah.
story short. So this might be actually a good time. So Boz didn't ask me to do this, but Speaking of long story short, you have you wrote a book about all of this, and
Yes, I did. Yeah.
as you can see here, Risen from Prison, Beyond My Wildest Imagination. I mean, we are just, in the time that we have, we are just scratching the surface. This is such a compelling book. Boz, I didn't mention this to you when we were talking before we started recording. My wife is not a reader. Okay, she's like, I literally can't remember the last book that she read. But and she's working her way through this slowly because again, she's not a reader. But this is one of the only books that I can think of. There's maybe one or two others in all the time that I've known her. That if we're going somewhere, it's holidays or we've got a couple days of downtime, she will make sure to bring this with her.
Wow.
Because she's met you, of course, but she is just so fascinated by your story and is just so drawn into it. So there is, of course, more, and I want to get us. I mean, again, we're just skipping over so much. I want to get us to where you and I met. But before I do, now that I've plugged your book, if someone's interested in buying this book, where can they get it?
Well, they're easy. Amazon. You can find it on Amazon, and supposedly at different bookstore, especially Christian bookstore around Canada and North America. But since we're in social distancing and cities has been shut down right now, so I think best way is to get it on Amazon.
Okay, great. So in prison for 4 years, you apply for early parole. They grant you early parole, but you still have 8 years of your sentence that now you're still serving, but you're serving out in the regular community, but you've got a parole officer and curfews and so on and so forth. And more importantly, though, like you said, you have this extraordinary encounter with the risen Lord. Your life is transformed by His grace. He basically calls you or enables you to become an evangelist in prison. Now you've been released from prison and you're back in the community. What happens?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The first year and a half, it was really tough. Before I went to prison, there was no iPhone, no iPad. I came back out, you have all this iPhone, new technologies that I have to get used to. Still owing my parents a lot of money. Then they couldn't find a regular job, so to speak. I went to interview at Starbucks and some clothing stores. And I'm a Christian now. To be honest, when people ask, so what happened for those 4 years that was blank, I basically honestly told them that, hey, I was in prison. And next thing you know, I never hear from them ever again.
I'm surprised.
Exactly. Anyway, long story short, so after a year and a half of soul searching, so to speak, in the outside world under curfew, a 9 p.m. curfew back then, couldn't do much, especially music wise. I just keep serving at church. I just want to love on people. I landed on a church called More Than 12, which back then was having their service as a wise hall. It's kind of like a nightclub kind of environment, which kind of I could fit in back then. So I started to reach out to different people in the nightclub scenes with this church, starting to become a voluntary evangelist or urban missionary, so to speak, to begin with. Doing some study on the side, doing some side job at a cell phone repair store on the side right beside Chinatown. And that's how I started to grow my ministry out there in the outside world.
And so you're plugged into More Than 12, serving there. And again, I want you to tell the story because it's just.
I can, of course I can. And then I slowly become like I still write music. I still wrote music, but now it has a gospel essence to my music. So I started to go to different schools, different social events, and I even went back to the CSC, like Canada Correctional Service events, to share my stories and my music there, and it was pretty interesting how that could happen. Later on, I became a modern a role model for inmates and employees, and I got invited to speak and whatnot, and I started to preach and to give messages at more than 12, and I studied more, and then later on I became a pastor, probably about 5 years ago.
Okay, hold on, pause, because you just like, oh, and then I became the pastor.
Right, I know, right?
This is
I'm just skipping a lot of stuff. I get it.
I know you're skipping a lot of stuff, but I just
right.
like, again, these are the parts of the story, and this is, Boz, why I just appreciate you so much, because you are so humble, and you just sort of roll these things out like, well, I was in prison, and then God called me into this evangelistic ministry while I was under curfew, and then I got involved in this church, and then I became the pastor of the church.
I know that is insane.
For those who are watching and who don't know, More Than 12 is one of our BC Yukon district churches, and based now in Richmond. And so, in terms of my role, helping to oversee, some of our churches, especially church plants and so on, that's where you and I first had the opportunity to meet. And it wasn't long after I met you, and I'm hearing new stuff again in this story that you're telling. So it wasn't long after I met you, though, that I discovered you had this sort of incredible history that God used in such an extraordinary way. And so we're coming to the conclusion of part 1 of our video here. Just tell me a little bit about so More Than 12. Now you're the lead pastor of this church. What was that like? Like, what were the things that you just, if I can ask this, like, what were the things that you just felt that you loved to do and that you were uniquely equipped to do? And maybe on the flip side, what were some of the things that you found really challenging?
Okay. More Than 12 has been a very unique community, as I said earlier. Like, it birthed out from a nightclub kind of vibe or environment to attract certain people to come into the ministry. I think on that side, it's very unique in many ways. We used to have DJs and worship rappers, and I was one of them when I first started off serving there. However, the structure to maintain this very unique community to keep going has been challenging for myself to, at least because I was just new to the role, and I have many learning curves to overcome. To give it a structure to people that are not used to structure is something that's so difficult. But yet, as I pastor the church years after years, for the past so long, I find that some sort of structure is needed if we want to sustain this community as a church body, so to speak. Now, however, I think we can enlarge the structure a little bit, where some of these people that are not used to structure can still feel welcome and still feel belong. But it's very unique in a sense that when I was there pastoring the church, now I'm in Hong Kong right now, and we'll get to that in our next interview. When I was still pastoring the church, we have this unique calling to really use our influence to really spread out to the rest of our community, where people, or the new generation of people that are not used to the traditional church setting. So we try really hard to create that environment to welcome those people. I think that is unique and it's something that I love doing. Once again, the structural side, because since I'm an artist as well, we have some challenging experience and to establish a very suitable structure, so to speak, for this community.
Yeah. So I'm going to draw this part of the interview to a close, because there is a whole other piece now You mentioned just a moment ago that you're on this Zoom call with me from Hong Kong.
Yes.
So what I want to do in the next video is talk about what's happening now, and what unique ministry God's called you to in Hong Kong. So for those of you who are still watching, thank you for sticking with us this long. And trust me, the story continues to be so fascinating. And so Boz is going to tell us a little bit more about what God has called him into in Hong Kong in our next video. And so I hope that you'll join us for that.